We have two awesome people today that have come together on insanely short notice. We only planned this on Wednesday of this week because it's a fast evolving situation, and a lot of folks in the community, want to talk about it and compare notes. We have Mike Hebert, who runs the People Shop at edX. Mike has a ton of experience in recruiting and people ops at a bunch of large companies, including Wayfair and now edX. You were at Monster in between and a couple other places. Mike recently transitioned his team from being all local to working from home. And it's a pretty large organization. And so he's going to share some thoughts and learnings from that. We also have Basil Fakhouri, who is based in New York and is the CEO of User Interviews. And he actually runs a completely remote all distributed team, and he's been running that for a few years now. So for him, it's almost like there's not a ton of change in his day-to-day. But I asked him to be here because he's going to have some valuable perspective from the executive side of how to change mindset for the executive team as they're making this transition. Because at some point in the past, he had to do that. So we're going to start with you, Mike. And how have the last few weeks been? Tell us how it's been going and what you guys have been doing over at edX.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the scramble on this, Vinayak. I know this was a busy week, and to get us together, it was quite a thing. And we've got some people here joining us, which is fantastic. I see the attendees coming in, so it's great. I think there's some material here that may help you. When I think of the last couple of weeks, in 20 years of working, I don't remember anything like this. I think the last time it was this odd was somewhere around 9/11. This has been very strange to adapt to, and we have to work on instinct and just common sense to put a plan together to take an entire company and bring it to a work from home situation. There is no playbook, so we've had to do what we can to make it work. I thought it'd be fun just to walk through a timeline, because it's only been about 2 weeks, right? But it feels almost in slow motion at times and very, very fast at other times. It was just I went through the logs. I went through the email logs. I went through all of my, my Slack logs to find out exactly when did this start, like the chatter. And at edX, it was somewhere around February 13th, which is where it kind of like started to pick up on the radar, and people were just talking about it. And back then, people are sharing articles and passing them back and forth and saying, hey, I'm here and my friends are overseas and they're talking about this crazy disease. I wonder what it's all about. And that's it really for about a week or two. And somewhere on February 25th, it gets a lot more serious. And I started seeing more chatter in the Slack channels and on email. And I'm doing a lot of reading because I tend to get into this stuff on a world basis. So this is the point where I am starting to carry around a little container of hand sanitizer, because I'm starting to wonder what is going on, and I'm not feeling entirely sure. But I do know I'm going to take care of myself in that regard. On March 2nd, this is when HR at edX starts to actually talk meaningfully about this. And the HR manager and myself are starting to look at CDC recommendations for how to work remotely, different business considerations, cleanliness and other kinds of things. And you and I actually have lunch on this day, Vinayak. You and I go out to lunch and have an initial conversation about like, where are we headed here and what's going to happen. So, and it feels like just yesterday you and I were sitting at that restaurant, but now here we are. The next day, the next day after that is March 3rd, and this is, I'm at the table with my executive team at edX, and we're talking meaningfully about like, what are we going to do, because we actually have to put things into motion now. But it's still not at the critical phase, and this was only about a week ago, week and a half. But we know that we have to have serious discussions about travel for sure. Like maybe that's a call we can make right away. And so we start to put in some recommendations around travel for our staff and say, if you're feeling sick, don't come in. If you don't feel comfortable, come into the office. We're starting to get that ball rolling. And definitely giving people tips to take care of themselves. And now this starts like a steady steady communication chain from this point forward. On March 5th, the Biogen news comes out. And if you know where edX is in Cambridge, we're right there. And we share the shuttles with them, the Biogen employees. We are sharing restaurants with the Biogen employees, the MBTA. We're in the community. So this is where I think it gets real. And I think later on in this discussion, I can tell you about some of the things that we actually did and put into motion. But from March 5th through just a couple days ago, it is us moving quickly to prepare our office from a full work from home situation.
So let's go to Basil. Basil, what was your perspective on kind of what's been happening? And I mean, I know you already have a work from home, but what are you seeing in your community, especially because you're in New York?
Yeah, it was a bit surreal because, like you said, we're already a fully distributed team, so everyone works from home. So in some ways, the day-to-day didn't change for us. But in other ways, it was weird because obviously everything around us was changing in a lot of ways. And the way we really thought about it was like, first, like make sure everyone's okay, figure out like, is anything different in their lives? Like, do they have like kids home from school now that then will like change their schedules and make sure that we're flexible there? And then second, like, okay, is the company okay? Like what's changing like on the client side? Do we need to change anything on the cash flow side? But then I think something that was easier for us was just, is there anything else in the workflow? And I've had a lot of people reach out like, hey, what do you do when you work remote? Like a lot of things I realized that I'm taking for granted weren't necessarily for granted. So was talking to people around like different ways to do that.
Awesome. So my next question for both of you kind of is kind of trying to change mindset on the executive team about this. So Mike, when it comes to edX, were there any challenges with with kind of the company decision to decide to go kind of all work from home? As in, were there did you have kind of any naysayers or folks that needed to be convinced, or what was the discussion like, and how did you approach that with the executive team?
Yeah, no resistance. I would say that it was probably our some of our finest work actually to come together as a leadership team and just to know that this was for real, it was going to happen, and we moved very quickly into execution mode on it. So the beauty of the modern era is whether or not, there's two conversations. There's the, are you technically set up to have a distributed workforce of 220 people plus? And then there's, the other side of it, which is like, are you ready for that? Like, are you mentally ready for it? Are your homesteads ready for that? And so that really, if anything, the technical part has never been an issue. And we have a general flexibility around that work from home situation if you need it, but what we hadn't had is everybody doing it. So, I think we went into it eyes wide open. All of us have done this before from home, but the difference obviously is the collective and having everybody online, remote, and trying to make it work. So truth be told, we're still in the middle of working on that and figuring it out, but so far so good. I've been impressed by the leadership team, but I've been just as impressed by the staff at edX and everyone helping each other and making sure that they're in the know and being over communicative.
Yeah, I mean, if only everyone in our company came together like this on every day, that'd be sweet. So Mike, as you were thinking through the transition, did you use like any checklists, or what was the like? I want to dive a little bit deeper into the tactical operational plan. Like who was tasked with what, and and what were some of the like all employee communication you sent? Did you have like different levels of protocols? Like how did you structure that?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is about a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago, we actually put together, a fairly robust business continuity plan across the org. So this has been drafted and shared amongst each other. So we had a baseline in place. I think the first step we had, but that's a document, and then you actually have to run it when it goes live. And that's kind of where we were at a week ago. But the first decision is, we should run a test first. And so we actually ran our test on Tuesday to see, and we're not alone. I've heard friends all across the Boston ecosystem. Some went live. I'm impressed with the boldness to just go full work from home. Most I'm talking to had run a test of some kind. So I would say that the first thing on our checklist was to run that test, and we did that on Tuesday. It went really well. We were able to convert very quickly to make the decision to go full work from home within 24 hours or less of that test. I have a list of other things that are on the checklist, but like I said earlier, there is there's nowhere to look necessarily for the reality of this kind of a thing. You got to use some common sense instinct, and you got to communicate, because what I did find out is that there were so many ideas coming in from everybody. The big thing was to to organize them and put them in a place where you could find them, organize, and those became the steps. All the observations, whether it be connectivity, childcare, comms, systems, proper messaging, and the cadence of that messaging. So all of these things, and we should talk about some of that in the call today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So Basil, I mean, you made the decision to go fully distributed like a long time ago, and like Mike said, only part of it is like the tools and tech, but a big part of it is like kind of, are you ready for it? And so, as people are going to, kind of make the switch at a lot of companies, maybe already they've started doing it this week, and maybe they'll do it next week, but it looks like we might be in an extended period of time for this. And so, what do you think folks should do, or like, what are some of the things that you learned during your first month of doing this that you can share so that people can adapt from that, both from a leadership perspective and just from a personal perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So we started off remote, so it's in our DNA. And I've been a big proponent for it, just hiring, the flexibility, everything's really nice, and people seem to really like it. From a company point of view, I think you have to be much more deliberate about culture and about like organic conversations and organic knowledge share. So at the beginning, like the first thing is like, what are we losing by being remote? You're losing like the ability to just like tap your coworker on the shoulder. So you want to really like build that in to the system. So the way you do that is, for us, we have like, as leadership, like be very active on Slack, like have like small conversations that get people going there. So they feel more comfortable, because people will take a lead. And then another thing we realize is that I think like naturally I'm someone who thinks like you don't want to have too many meetings. Meetings take up a lot of time. But when you're remote, meetings are a way to have organic conversations that you might not be having. So you almost have to put in like these inorganic structures to have these organic conversations. So a big thing we do is we're like, hey, this group of people should probably make sure they're talking like 30 minutes a week. And we actually don't have an agenda for it. We have a Google Doc that throughout the week before that, you just put in bullet points of what you want to talk about at that meeting. And we have this for lots of different like groups of people. So that's like a really good tip. You want to think about like, what are we losing and how can we actually like make that a fixed part of the culture.
So is it almost like an agenda-less team meeting?
Yeah, and for different teams, not the whole team. That's one way, but we have like leadership does it, like I do it with all the VPs, like different VPs do it with each other, and then like all the different cross sections.
It's kind of like it's kind of like scheduled water cooler time, if for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so that's the next thing I was gonna get. Just the first one's less water cooler because it's like you're actually talking about work stuff. The other thing we have is which we call water cooler, which always sounds a little corny at first, but basically just we build in time throughout the week where it's like 15, 30 minutes where you just get in with a random group of people and you talk about non-work things. So you can just get that like that banter out, that real relationship. That's hard to get when you're just talking about work things. So water cooler is really the template for us around that. We also have a lot of Slack channels that are, not work related. And then we use this app called Donut, which will like pair you with other people in the company randomly. Just have like 30-minute conversations. So as far as just knowing people outside of work, we try to build in those structures also.
So, Mike, did anything go wrong as you were making the transition, or has anything gone wrong since you started the transition? Like what went wrong, if anything?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question. It was pretty smooth. There's always room for improvement, but I think like overall we landed this plane, and that I'm proud of, but it's that we all came together and did it. The things that, we took care of like the baseline essentials. Do we have connectivity? Can our staff hook in? You make assumptions about everyone's internet connectivity, assume everyone's got enough, bandwidth to do this, but it's not always true. So like those are things that we were able to kind of clarify in the test. There are probably some things on communication that could have been a little clearer, but I really wanted to work with the leadership team at edX to make sure that we were over communicating. So I have no regrets yet, but like, remember, we're still in this thing right now. Technically speaking, I tried to push as many people out the door as possible in the last 2 days, but Monday is actually go live. So the last check, there's probably a dozen or so people mingling around the office trying to pick up their stuff and put it in the box. But I think if you ask me that question, somewhere around Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I really think that we did a good job here, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of everyone coming together. I'm just looking at my notes here. That water cooler time is something we're discovering, Basil. Like, we are trying to experiment. We have a couple of people that instinctively went and just created open webcam sessions. I don't know how long it lasts, but it's a neat idea. And I think there's other things like, how do you handle the question of, I'm a manager and I have a team of 20 and I want to gather somewhere. It sounds good, and for Basil, and during normal work times, I'm sure that is a reality that you and it's something you embrace. But here, in the middle of this kind of thing, it's the recommendation is: do you want to do that, manager? Is that a position you want to put your staff in? To have to opt into that tough choice, especially when we're dealing with the kinds of stories we're hearing about spread and transmission, right? So like those are the things in the next week I'm going to be watching really closely. What kind of pressures are on staff?
So by the way, thank you, audience members, for keeping the questions rolling in. Please keep them coming. Next question is from Maya, and I'll use first names, audience folks, so that you have partial anonymity in case you want that. The question is, how do you keep morale up? Are there any rituals that help people feel together and keep the culture alive? And so I guess this is appropriate for both, because Basil's been doing it for a while, and Mike's about to have to do it.
Yeah, Basil, tell us.
Well, I think there's kind of 2 parts to that question, right? There's morale when you're a remote company, because sometimes it is a little harder to rally, right, when not everyone's in the same room. And really, the way to do that is just to over communicate, celebrate. We have a wins channel that's just on Slack where people just post wins.
I like the wins channel. That's a great channel.
Yeah, wins channel.
We should have a wins channel. I'm gonna note that for us. Yeah.
Yeah, we do a thing also. Like, we're very Slack heavy, right? So we do we have like company values, and when someone shows them, we'll put different like emojis. We used to use this thing called Hey Taco. We now use this thing called Disco. So there's a lot of tools in there that seem very small but can really help people.
Oh, hang on. So let me dig in on the Slack emoji thing. So you have emojis in Slack for every company value, and then people respond with like company value emojis when someone demonstrates a company value. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's also a good way for people to keep the values kind of like the top.
That's an amazing idea. Yeah.
I'm gonna steal that for sure.
Yeah. And then, so that's just like remote in general, like keeping morale when the markets are crashing and things like this. I think it's just like over communicating, right? Like we're still getting sales, pipeline's still full, trying to get ahead of it, like figure out like should we change this? We're talking with investors. So just over communicating and letting them see like, hey, this is like what we're worried about. These are the bad things we've seen, and these are like the good things, and this is how we feel. So that's been our approach.
All right. Next up we have.
If I could, there's a couple of things that I've seen. If there's anybody on the call that is like where edX is right now, just getting going on this. Some fun little things that we've got going on in Slack are people sharing their workspaces from home, which is really funny because right now, I saw a computer on a puzzle box next to a dog, near a laundry basket. Like we're early stages and we're watching the evolution of these workspaces, and it's kind of fun, and it lets us loosen up a little bit and come together. And actually, to some degree, it gets us to know each other just a little bit better than we did, which is so ironic given that we're digital now.
Okay, next question is from Mark, and yeah, this is a question that I've already definitely dealt with. Have you had to tell people that their setting or background for a video call is inappropriate for internal communications or even customer-facing calls? And if you have had to tell them this, how do you do that without being insulting and in the right way?
We've actually never had that that I can think of, unless we're just letting a bunch of inappropriate things happen in the background. Sometimes with sound, so we'll tell people like, hey, you can't do demos from. Not that anyone did this. You can't really do calls from like a coffee shop. It's a little bit too loud a lot of times. But generally, yeah, we haven't had that yet.
Mike, any experiences with that?
Not yet. Let's talk next week. We'll set up another one of these.
So it's funny. So I've actually had some experience with this, oddly, even though our company is not historically remote. But it's been actually the other way around because at Drafted we do a lot of customer onboardings where there's a lot of attendees on one call, and some of them may be like remote and working from home. And so we've definitely had some snafus where people have been like in a bathrobe or something like that when they're on the call. And one of the things that you could easily do is simply to like publish like a community video communication standard, like 1-page document that's just like, don't wear, like don't be in PJs and like make sure that you packed away your bong from Friday. Like
yeah, it's always good.
So all right, on to the next one. Oh, and by the way, for the audience, if you don't feel like we answered your question inadequately or you want to clarify, just feel free to like submit more questions. Like that's no problem. So is there any new technology that you weren't using before that you had to acquire with the outlook of running operations smoothly? And this kind of goes for both, like so Basil, is there any technology that you think that local companies don't need as much that you would recommend people using definitely if they're going remote? I mean, I assume that everyone's using the obvious technologies because we all do, but yeah, anything that people may not be using if they're local?
No, I mean nothing that's not obvious. Like I mentioned a few different like kind of Slack apps. We use Zoom a lot for conversations, a lot of Google Docs. It's more just the way you use them is sometimes different. Like I think you can build a mindset around like being async instead of synchronous, which is worth thinking through and spending some time thinking through.
Yeah, one of the tools that I'm trying out is Remote HQ. It's a Boston startup, and it lets you just have like a room that's like always open, and so like anyone can come and like knock on your door and like come into your room. Like that's the way it works. And then and it also allows like digital whiteboarding. So it's like basically I can have like an office hours type thing going on where like I just have a room and then you can come and knock, and then if I want to like doodle on the whiteboard with them, we can do that. So yeah, I mean, I've only tried it for a couple of days, but yeah, ask me again in a week.
Yeah, those are good things. We're pretty basic running the Google Suite at so if anything, my antenna are up right now to see what the load on Google is through all of this. I don't know technically on the back end how many like nodes or ports are open for Google Hangouts, but I imagine the entire free world is going to be using products like that. So I'm hoping, like, these are my thoughts. I hope that stays together and holds up under this duress. The other one is these neighborhood networks, and I've posted a little bit about this in various places. We're used to that heavy, T-line into Cambridge, but what about these FiOS connections and Comcast connections in neighborhoods that are being run like, as it is right now? I had to kick the kids off the PlayStation because I don't want them stealing my bandwidth for this call. So like, that's just here. I don't know what the rest of the neighborhood's doing, but we're all sharing the same pipe. So I don't know. These are things I'm thinking about from a tooling and technology standpoint.
One other one I forgot. We use, some of these tools, like they're not only for remote companies, right? So other people use them, but we might use them more. So like InVision has Freehand, and we kind of use that almost as a whiteboard sometimes. And we do a lot of like note taking on Notion. So that kind of goes towards that async mindset where you want to just have things that people can come see at different times and comment on at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like live, like I guess like live text documentation discussion is like definitely like is definitely Notion. Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Any yeah. Last call for questions from the audience, and then we're gonna wrap up with some extra resources and things for everyone to check out. All right. Going once. Oh, here we go. Any chance we can get a list of these tools after the session? Absolutely. We will be publishing a list of all the things mentioned in today's webinar on the blog. And someone writes a question saying, "This is fantastically helpful. Thanks, Elise. Thanks for coming." And maybe one of the things that we might do is in the coming weeks, as people are getting settled in, based on how things are going, we might have some new learnings, and we might do another one or two of these in the coming weeks. So if you have any questions for that, feel free to send them to us, or if you have any ideas for like other things that we can do. One of our objectives here is that now that everyone's remote, we also actually don't get as much interaction with our like cross-company coffee meetings, right? Like I don't get to call Mike up and be like, "Hey, let's grab lunch at the Friendly Toast." Outside of the office. And so, that's something that I've been thinking about, and about how to bring some of the folks in our People and Talent Ops community together virtually. So we'll think about doing something there. If you have any ideas, definitely let me know. And then we have a list of resources for you that I'm trying to get up here on the screen, but we're also going to publish them, and we'll send them to all of you. We'll also have a recording of this that we'll send to all of you. And I think the ones off the top of my head are the JHU coronavirus tracker. If you haven't seen it like plastered all over the internet already for some reason, you should definitely look at the the Johns Hopkins. Like you can just search for like Johns Hopkins COVID-19 map, which is a great source of understanding what the latest is. Obviously, as we all know, that's not up to date always, but it's the most up to date out of any of them. And then there's an awesome real-time graph from Martin Hens on Twitter. Thanks to Mike for giving us a bunch of these resources. Anything I'm missing?
Not from a resource standpoint. Are we closing up now? I just wanted to say a couple of things.
Yeah. We're gonna close up in the next couple of minutes. So yeah. Closing remarks or anything that we missed in the questions or stuff that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I'm on this call from a people standpoint. As the head of people for edX, the attitude and the mindset I brought to this call was about making the transition as easy as possible for your teams. And there's a couple things I wanted to say about this thing. There's the technological solutions and things that we're talking about here, the tools, but there's also the people themselves. So if you're on this call and you're wondering like about the folks themselves and taking care of them, I would recommend highly a high touch and very consistent communications during the transition, because this isn't just a transition to work from home. This is an unprecedented time, and people are in different phases of acceptance for exactly what's going on here. So I think you're going to share some of this, but one thing that I've been thinking about every day, especially as I write mass emails to all 200 people in the company, is how is this going to be received, and how do we make sure they understand that this is under control, like we've got this. So if you're a head of people out there or a head of talent, you got to think about, we didn't even really have time today to talk about the new people that may be showing up. We have a class of, 7 to 10 people showing up a week from Monday. How do you bring them in to an organization? Unlike Basil, we don't have that, root in remote work fully. So we've got to build that now. So anyways, this call could be twice as long as it is, but I just want people, no matter what you do, what tools or playbook you design, just remember all the people on the other end who are looking for your strength and guidance through all of this.
Can't think of a better closing than that. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll let you get back to your Fridays from home. Have a safe weekend, and and stay in touch. I mean, we're like, we'll do this more often, and we're all here, Basil, myself, and Mike. You can email us, you can get in touch. If you just want someone to talk to, like, we're around.
Thanks, Vinayak.
Thanks, Basil. Thanks, Mike.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.